So we just had a really interesting conversation on the Rogues in the House podcast about POV. And my co-host LD Whitney mentioned how we used POV to enhance the story of Jangar, Slaves of the Mind Mage. Now, one of my favorite things about being on this podcast is actually being able to talk with these really excellent authors, Matt John and LD Whitney. Before that talk on that last episode, I had never spoken with Logan, but I had read his work. And in fact, I actually ran a review on Jangar, Slaves of the Mind Mage on Substack. And it was very favorable. I really loved that story. Since we didn't really talk in the episode at length about that story in specific, I kind of wanted to share my thoughts here on YouTube, both about what I thought about the first Jangar story in the 6-part stretch, and also how Whitney uses POV to his advantage. Hi everyone, I'm James, an author, editor, and the owner of The Arcanist, an independent publisher dedicated to sharing excellent fantasy fiction. Point of view is one of those things that you need to iron down immediately. It's important in every story you tell, regardless of if you're writing from the perspective of a jungle warrior or from a staircase. You have to know who is narrating. It might not actually be the POV character, such as the case in most omniscient third-person stories. You have to understand whether you're narrating in the third, second, or first person, or are you doing something else that's very strange. These things need to have a reason, they need to be consistent, they need to be intelligently placed within your story, or your story is just going to be a freaking mess. Slaves of the Mind Mage has two POV characters. Of course, we have Jangar, the jungle warrior, and that one's pretty cool. But then we also have Yala, who is a priestess on the run, trying to escape her home city and get somewhere else to live a more fortuitous life, and she gets caught up in the jungle. This is where it all starts. Jangar Slaves of the Mind Mage is the first installment of a 6-part ebook series by L.D. Whitney, which is going to be compiled into a paperback upon completion. It's fun and momentous and boasts some of the cleanest prose I've seen in an indie publication. Before we even jump into the story and talk about how Whitney uses POV so well here, I want to take a moment to focus on this release strategy. It's brilliant. Though I love seeing novelettes published in print, ebooks are kind of like the new pulp paperback in the modern age. It's a very cheap and effective way to distribute a short piece of fiction to a lot of different people. Compiling a complete collection at the end of the run is a very frugal and effective way to meet print culture halfway. Also, a slow drip of excellent digital content is a surefire way to generate hype for that paperback release. Indie authors, take note. You should be doing this, especially if you write pulp. You also see this with Titan Books' Heroic Signatures series. Matthew John has a Cormac McArt ebook coming out. I think it's also priced at $2. And they do that with a bunch of different authors, with a bunch of different Conan characters. I think this format's really going to take off. It really serves hardcore readers and is going to get stuff out there and warm the market for when you put out your paperback. This first story introduces you to Jangar, a jungle roving barbarian with a straightforward worldview, bulging thews, and an ironclad will. The author lists Lynn Carter's Thongor as his classic influence and Steve Dilk's Gunthar as his modern core inspiration. I've never read Dilk's, although at this point I really should be reading Dilk's. What am I doing? So I can't attest to the similarities there, but I just finished Thongor and the Wizard of Lemuria a little while ago and published a review on that as well, thanks to reading Jangar. While I can definitely see Carter's roots running through Whitney's work, Whitney takes the concept of the jungle warrior and grounds him in historical realism. Thongor is over the top and ridiculous, which is not a criticism, it's part of what makes Thongor great. But Jangar's encounters in the jungle are weighty and tense, and they're bloody exciting when he inevitably kicks some ass. Pulp really thrives in the short form, and Whitney is clearly no stranger to starting off a short story with a bang. Note the repetition in this opening paragraph, the alliteration linking the drums with the wild jungle and Jangar's heart. The primeval forest, typically teeming with all manner of life, had yielded its roars and caterwauls to the relentless rhythm of those terrible drums. Jangar, reared in these wild lands by wild things, knew well the drumbeat. That is such a good opening paragraph. You'll see this form of repetition a lot in works like Steven Erickson's Malazan series. Those books are massive, but they're composed like short stories. And Erickson, the beginning of Gardens of the Moon, will use repetition to draw attention to a certain theme within a chapter. Every chapter is kind of treated like its own piece of fiction. Repetition, linking themes together, it's all just stitched together super well in this first paragraph to set you up for what's to come. All right, now let's talk about the POV aspects. The opening of this tale finds Jangar searching for his unnamed companion. He encounters a group of reptilian humanoids called Urmen in the process of sacrificing a woman in tribute to their mega dino god, Thok, by blowing a sacred horn to summon the hungry beast. The woman on the pyre is Yala, and despite her present circumstance, she is no damsel in distress. She's fleeing a life of sedentary and complacency, crossing through the jungle on her way out of her home city, when her traveling party was ambushed by the Urmen. Chapter 1's all in Jangar's point of view, but then it shifts over to Yala for Chapter 2, where she witnesses Jangar's prowess as a stranger witnessing a force of nature. But she also takes advantage of her own turn of fate by snatching the dropped god-summoning horn in the chaos. This is a literary bell that Whitney is going to ring to great effect throughout the tale. This horn is very important, and it's Yala's cleverness that brings it into the story and ultimately uses it for their victory. I'm not going to spoil it. The story continues alternating between Jangar's and Yala's POVs. They have vastly different worldviews, perspectives, embodying that classic Howardian dichotomy between a life of primal survival versus civilized sedentary. The author utilizes this classic theme to lace a subtle nuance through the entire narrative. Where Jangar stirs my blood, Yala kept the pages turning. She's vulnerable because she's not a crazy barbarian, which adds tension to the scenes when she's left alone. But she's also clever and she has good instincts. She helps Jangar as much as he helps her. Now, I didn't write this in my review, but towards the end, there is a situation where they are being presented with temptations of a magical sort. And the stuff that is presented to Jangar is very much in line with his point of view, and in no way does he ever become tempted. But Yala gets a very different presentation from the magical illusions, and for a while I was convinced that she was going to join up with the villain. A very unconventional thing to happen in a pulp story, and you could maybe have that meta argument, oh, of course not, it won't happen. But when an author makes you think it might, oh, that's good writing. Every change of POV up to the ante, progressed complications, and generated momentum. Whitney has crafted what appears to be a simple tale on the surface, a framework that's been iterated upon 1,000 times over, but he did so in a way that only he could do. Jangar carries echoes of Thongor, but the similarity between the two is more akin to the resemblance of a young boy and the grown man he grew into. Jangar is the natural evolution of pulp fantasy jungle warrior, a maturation of a fun concept that demands proper attention in 2026. The technique, the narrative content, and even the publishing strategy take the sturdy bones of the classics and arranges them into something altogether stronger. Strongor, Thongor. Oh, wonder if that was a pun. I don't have much to criticize about this story. It was tight, it was short, and beyond wishing that I had seen more of Jangar's wild companion, I suppose I'll just have to read the next one. Oh darn. For $2 on Kindle, this tale is 100% worth your time if you love the classic jungle diving sword and sorcery. Another thing that's worth your time, we are running a backer kit this summer. Now, I told you we were going to fund the Literary Fantasy magazine, but since then I've also created another magazine, one that's completely dedicated to the craft of Thu-bound tales of thrilling sword and sorcery and heroic fantasy. That's right. Mordschlag, Sword and Sorcery magazine, will be joining the roster on BackerKit this summer. Backers will have their choice of literary fantasy periodicals or sword and sorcery periodicals. Or you could just have them all. We are running that backer kit in July. You can follow it now to get some free goodies. You'll get all the 2025 issues of TLFM and a free short story from Mordschlag issue 0. So follow us on backer kit. Don't miss the fun. I'll see you there. Oh, and read Thongor. I meant Jangar. Oh, and read Jangar. You won't regret it.